Letter 8 of Letters from England, 1846 to 1849, by Elizabeth Davis Bancroft. Read for LibriVox.org into the public domain. Letter to W.D.B. and A.B., London, January 1st, 1847. My dear sons, I wrote my last sheet on the 19th, and your father went on that day to Cambridge to be present at the tricentennial celebration of Trinity College. He went also the day after the anniversary, which was on our 22nd December, to Ely, with Peacock, the great mathematician, who is Dean of Ely, to see the great cathedral there. While he was at Cambridge, I passed the evening of the 22nd at Lady Morgan's, who happened to have a most agreeable set. Lady Morgan's reunions are entertaining to me because they are collections of lions, but they are not strictly and exclusively fashionable. They remind me in their composition, from various circles, of Mrs. Otis's parties in Boston. We have in this respect an advantage over the English themselves, as in our position we see a great variety of cliques. For instance, last evening, the 31st, I took Louisa at 7:30 to the house of Mr. Hawes, an Under Secretary of State, to see a beautiful children's masque. It was an impersonation of the Old Year, dressed a little like Lear with snowy hair and draperies. Old Year played his part inimitably, at times with great pathos, and then introducing witty hits at all the doings of his reign, such as exploding cotton, the new planet, a subject which he put at rest as far beyond our reach, etc., etc. He then introduced one by one the children of all ages as days of the coming year. There was Twelfth Day, crowned as Queen, with her cake in her hands. There was Christmas, covered with holly and mistletoe. There was April Fool's Day, dressed as Harlequin. There was above all Shrove Tuesday, with her frying pan of pancakes, dressed as a little cook. There was a charming boy of 14 or 15, as St. Valentine's Day, with his packet of valentines addressed to the young ladies present. There was the 5th of November, full of wit and fun, etc., the longest day, an elder brother, of William's height, with a cap of 3 or 4 feet high, and his little sister of 5, as the shortest day. This was all arranged to music, and each made little speeches, introducing themselves. The Old Year, after introducing his successors, and after much pathos, is going, gone, and falls covered with his drapery, upon removing which, instead of the lifeless body of the Old Year, is discovered a sweet little flower-crowned girl of 5 or 6, as the New Year. It was charming, and I was so pleased that, instead of taking Louisa away at 9 o'clock as I intended, I left her to see Sir Roger de Coverley in the dress of his time. Last night at Mr. Putnam's I met William and Mary Howitt, and some of the lesser lights. I have put down my pen to answer a note just brought in to dine next Thursday with the Dowager Countess of Charleville, where we were last week in the evening. She is 84. Tell this to grandmamma, and still likes to surround herself with beaux and belles esprits, and as her son and daughter reside with her, this is still easy. The old lady talks French as fast as possible, and troubles me somewhat by talking it to me, forgetting that a foreign minister's wife can talk English. Your father likes to be here. He has copying going on in the State Paper Office and British Museum, and his heart is full of manuscripts. It is the first thought, I believe, whoever he sees, what papers are in their family. He makes great interest with even the ladies sometimes for this purpose. Upon the whole, I love my own country better than ever, but whether I shall not miss, upon my return, some things to which I am gradually getting accustomed, I have yet to learn. The gratification of mixing constantly with those foremost in the world for rank, science, literature, or all which adorns society, is great, but there is a certain yearning towards those whose habits, education, and modes of thought are the same as our own, which I can never get over. In the full tide of conversation I often stop and think, I may unconsciously be jarring the prejudices or preconceived notions of these people upon 1,000 points, for how differently have I been trained from these women of high rank, and men too, with whom I am now thrown. Upon all topics we are accustomed to think, perhaps, with more latitude. Religion, politics, morals, everything. I like the English extremely, even more than I had expected, and yet happy I am to think that our own best portions of society can bear a comparison with theirs. When I see you I can explain to you the differences, but I think we need not be ashamed of ourselves. End of Letter 8. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information, please visit LibriVox.org. of Letters from England 1846 to 1849, by Elizabeth Davis Bancroft. Into the public domain. Letter to I.P.D. London, January 2nd, 1847. My dear Uncle, I refer you to my letters to my boys for all the new persons and places we may have lately seen, while I give you for Auntie's amusement a minute account of my visit into the country at Mr. Bates's, where things are managed in a scrupulously English manner, so that it will give her the same idea of country life here as if it were a nobleman's castle. Our invitation was to arrive on Thursday, the day before Christmas, to dine and to remain until the following Tuesday morning. His place is at East Sheen, which receives its name from the Anglo-Saxon word for beauty. It adjoins Richmond Park, beyond which is the celebrated Richmond Hill, Twickenham, Kew, etc., etc. We arrived at East Sheen at 5:30, but I ought first to mention the preparations for a country excursion. Our own carriage has, of course, no dickey for my maid, or conveniences for luggage, so we take a travelling carriage. The imperials, which are large flat boxes covering the whole top of the carriage, capital for velvet dresses, and smaller ones fitting into all the seats in the carriage, and before and behind, are brought to you the day before. I am merely asked what dresses I wish taken, and that is all I know of the matter, so thoroughly does an English maid understand her business. We were shown on our arrival into a charming room, semi-library. In a few minutes a servant came to show me to my apartment, which was very superb, with a comfortable dressing room and fire for Mr. Bancroft, where the faithful Keats unpacked his dressing materials, while I was in a few moments seated at the toilette to undergo my hair-dressing, surrounded by all my apparatus, and a blazing fire to welcome me with a hissing tea-kettle of hot water, and every comfort. How well the English understand it, I learn more and more every day. My maid had a large room above me, also with a fire. Indeed, a lady's maid is a very great character indeed, and would be much more unwilling to take her tea with, or speak familiarly to, a footman or a housemaid than I should. My greatest mistakes in England have been committed towards those high dignitaries, my own maid and the butler, whose grandeur I entirely misappreciated and invaded, as in my ignorance I placed them, as we do, on the same level with other servants. She has her fire made for her, and loaf sugar in her tea, which she and Kate sip in solitary majesty. However, she is most conscientious and worthy, as well as dignified, and thoroughly accomplished in her business. As all these things are pictures of English life, I mention them to amuse Auntie, who likes to know how these matters are managed. After I am dressed, I join the circle in the library, where I am introduced to Mr. and Madame Vanderweer, and Louis Bonaparte, the son of Louis, the ex-King of Holland, and of Hortense, Josephine's daughter. He was a long time imprisoned in the fortress of Ham, and has not long been free. There was also Napoleon, son of Jerome Bonaparte, and the Princess of Würtemberg. They were most agreeable, intelligent, and amiable young men, and I was glad to meet them. Lord and Lady Langdale, who have a place in the neighbourhood, were invited to dine with us. He is Master of the Rolls, and was elevated to the peerage from great distinction at the bar. Lady Langdale is a sensible and excellent person. At dinner I sat between Mr. Bates and Lord Langdale, whom I liked very much. The next morning we assembled at 10 for breakfast, which was at a round table, with a sort of circular tray, which turns at the least touch in the centre, leaving only a rim round the table for plates and cups. This was covered also with a white cloth, and on it were placed all the breakfast viands, with butter, sugar, cream, bread, toast rack, and preserves. You need no servants, but turn it around and help yourself. I believe the Vanderweers introduced it from a visit in Wales. Tea and coffee are served from a side table always here. Let me tell Auntie that our simple breakfast dress is unknown in England. You come down in the morning dressed for the day, until 6 or 7 in the evening, when your dress is low neck and short sleeves for dinner. At this season the morning dress is a rich silk or velvet, high body, quite close in the throat, with handsome collar and cuffs, and always a cap. Madame Vanderweer wore every day a different dress, all very rich, but I adhered to a black watered silk with the same simple cap I wore at home. I took a drive through Richmond Park, where Henry VIII watched to see a signal on the Tower when Anne Boleyn's head fell, and galloped off to marry Jane Seymour, to Richmond Terrace, which is ravishingly beautiful even at this season. The next day the gentlemen all went to town, and Madam Van de Weyer and I passed the day tête à tête, very pleasantly, as her experience in diplomatic life is very useful to me. Her manners are very pleasing and entirely unaffected. She has great tact and quickness of perception, great intelligence and amiability, and is altogether extremely well fitted for the rôle she plays in life. Her husband is charming. They have 3 children, very lovely. The eldest, Victor, a fine boy of 7 years old, Victoria, a girl of 4, for whom the Queen was sponsor, and Albert, to whom Prince Albert performed the same office. This was, of course, voluntary in the royal parties, as it was not a favour to be asked. Madam Van de Weyer is not spoiled, certainly, by the prominent part she was called to play in this great centre of the world at so early an age, and makes an excellent courtier. I could not help pitying her, however, for looking forward to going through, year after year, the same round of ceremonies, forms, and societies. For us it is a new study, and invaluable for a short time, but I could not bear it for life, as these European diplomatists. Besides, we Americans really enjoy a kind of society, and a much nearer intercourse, than other foreigners, in the literary, scientific, and even social circles. On Saturday evening Lord William Fitzroy and daughter joined our party with Sir William Hooker and Lady Hooker. Sir William Hooker is one of the most interesting persons I have seen in England. He is a great naturalist and has the charge of the great botanical gardens at Kew. He devoted a morning to us there, and it was the most delightful one I have passed. There are 28 different conservatories filled with vegetable wonders of the whole world. Length of time and regal wealth have conspired to make the Kew Gardens beyond our conceptions entirely. Sir William pointed out to us all that was very rare or curious, which added much to my pleasure. He showed us a drawing of the largest flower ever known on earth, which Sir Stamford Raffles discovered in Sumatra. It was a parasite, without leaves or stem, and the flower weighed 15 pounds. Lady Raffles furnished him the materials for the drawing. I dined in company with her not long ago, and regret now that I did not make her tell me about the wonders of that region. At the same dinner you may meet so many people, each having their peculiar gift, that one cannot avail oneself of the opportunity of extracting from each what is precious. I always wish I could sit by everybody at the same time, and I could often employ a dozen heads, if I had them, instead of my poor miserable one. From Sir William Hooker I learned as much about the vegetable world as Mr. Bancroft did from the Dean of Ely on architecture when he expounded to him the Cathedral of Ely, pointing out the successive styles of the Gothic, and the different periods in which the different parts were built. Books are dull teachers compared with these gifted men giving you a lecture upon subjects before your eyes. On Sunday we dined with our own party, on Monday some diplomatic people, the Lisboas and one of Mr. Bates's partners, and on Tuesday we came home. I must not omit a visit, while we were there, from Mr. Taylor, Van Artevelde, who is son-in-law of Lord Monteagle, and lives in the neighbourhood. He has a very fine countenance and still finer voice, and is altogether one of those literary persons who do not disappoint you, but whose whole being is equal to their works. I hope to see more of him, as they spoke of cultivating us, and Mr. Taylor was quite a protege of our kind and dear friend, Dr. Holland, and dedicated his last poem to him. This expression, "I shall cultivate you," we hear constantly, and it strikes me as oddly as our Western "being raised." Indeed, I hear improper Anglicisms constantly, and they have nearly as many as we have. The upper classes here, however, do speak English so roundly and fully, giving every letter its due, that it pleases my ear amazingly. On Wednesday I go for the first time to Westminster Abbey, on Epiphany, to hear the Athanasian Creed chanted. I have as yet had no time for sightseeing, as the days are so short that necessary visits take all my time. No one goes out in a carriage till after 2, as the servants dine at 1, and in the morning early the footman is employed in the house. A coachman never leaves his box here, and a footman is indispensable on all occasions. No visit can be paid till 3, and this gives me very little time in these short days. Everything here is inflexible as the laws of the Medes and Persians, and though I am called mistress even by old Cates with his grey hair and black coat, I cannot make one of them do anything, except by the person and at the time which English custom prescribes. They are brought up to fill certain situations, and fill them perfectly, but cannot or will not vary. I am frequently asked by the ladies here if I have formed a household to please me, and I am obliged to confess that I have a very nice household, but that I am the only refractory member of it. I am always asking the wrong person for coals, etc., etc. The division of labour, or rather ceremonies, between the butler and footman, I have now mastered, I believe, in some degree, but that between the upper and under housemaid is still a profound mystery to me, though the upper has explained to me for the 20th time that she did only the top of the work. My cook comes up to me every morning for orders, and always drops the deepest curtsy, but then I doubt if her hands are ever profaned by touching a poker, and she never washes a dish. She is cook and housekeeper, and presides over the housekeeper's room, which has a Brussels carpet and centre table, with one side entirely occupied by the linen presses, of which my maid, my vice-regent, only much greater than me, keeps the key and dispenses every towel, even for the kitchen. She keeps lists of everything, and would feel bound to replace anything missing. I shall make you laugh and Mrs. Goodwin stare, by some of my housekeeping stories, the next evening I passed in your little pleasant parlour. A word unknown here. End of Letter 9. Read by Sibella Denton. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information, please visit LibriVox.org. From England, 1846 to 1849, by Elizabeth Davis Bancroft. Read for LibriVox.org into the public domain. Letter to W.D.B. and A.B., London, January 10, 1847. My very dear children, yesterday we dined at Lady Charleville's, the old lady of 84, at whose house I mentioned an evening visit in my last letter, and I must tell you all about it to entertain dear grandma. I will be minute for once, and give you all the little details of a London dinner, and they are all precisely alike. We arrived at Cavendish Square 7:15, very early, and were shown into a semi-library on the same floor with the dining room. The servants take your cloak, etc., in the passage, and I am never shown into a room with a mirror as with us, and never into a chamber or bedroom. We found Lady Charleville and her daughter with one young gentleman with whom I chatted till dinner, and who, I found, was Sir William Burdett, son of Sir Francis and brother of Miss Angelina Coutts. I happened to have on the corsage of my black velvet a white moss rose and buds, which I thought rather youthful for me, but the old lady had them on her cap. She is full of intelligence, and has always been in the habit of drawing a great deal. Very soon came in Lord Aylmer, who was formerly Governor of Canada, and Lady Colchester, daughter of Lord Ellenborough, a very pretty woman of 35, I should think, Sir William and Lady Chatterton, and Mr. Algernon Greyville, whose grandmother wrote the beautiful Prayer for Indifference, an old favourite of mine, and Mr. McGregor, the political economist. Lord Aylmer took me out, and I found him a nice old peer, and discovered that ever since the death of his uncle, Lord Whitworth, whose title is extinct, he had borne the arms of both Aylmer and Whitworth. Mr. Bancroft took out Lady Colchester, and the old lady was wheeled out precisely as grandma is. At table she helped to the fish, cod, garnished round with smelts, and insisted on carving the turkey herself, which she did extremely well. By the way, I observe they never carve the breast of a turkey longitudinally, as we do, but in short slices, a little diagonally from the centre. This makes many more slices, and quite large enough when there are so many other dishes. The 4 entrée dishes are always placed on the table when we sit down, according to our old fashion, and not one by one. They have them warmed with hot water, so that they keep hot while the soup and fish are eaten. Turkey, even boiled turkey, is brought on after the entrées, mutton, a saddle always, or venison, with a pheasant or partridges. With the roast is always put on the sweets, as they are called, as the term dessert seems restricted to the last course of fruits. During the dinner there are always long strips of damask all around the table, which are removed before the dessert is put on, and there is no brushing of crumbs. You may not care for all this, but the housekeepers may. I had Mr. Greenville the other side of me, who seemed much surprised that I, an American, should know the Prayer for Indifference, which he doubted if 20 persons in England read in these modern days. It is a great mystery to me yet how people get to know each other in London. Persons talk to you whom you do not know, for no one is introduced, as a general rule. I have sometimes quite an acquaintance with a person, and exchange visits, and yet do not succeed for a long time in putting their name and the person together. It is a great puzzle to a stranger, but it has its conveniences for the English themselves. We are endeavouring to become acquainted with the English mind, not only through society, but through its products in other ways. Natural science is the department into which they seem to have thrown their intellect most effectively for the last 10 or 15 years. We are reading Whewell's History of the Inductive Sciences, which gives one a summary of what has been accomplished in that way, not only in past ages but in the present. Every moment here is precious to me, and I am anxious to make the best use of it, but I have immense demands on my time in every way. End of Letter 10. Read by Sibella Denton. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information, please visit LibriVox.org. Of Letters from England, 1846 to 1849, by Elizabeth Davis Bancroft. Read for LibriVox.org into the public domain. Letter to W.D.B. and A.B. Tuesday night, January 19, 1847. Today we have been present at the opening of Parliament, but how can I picture to you the interest and magnificence of the scene? I will begin quite back and give you all the preparations for a court day. 10 days before, a note was written to Lord Willoughby Daresby, informing him of my intention to attend, that a seat might be reserved for me, and also soliciting several tickets for American ladies and gentlemen. I cannot take them with me, however, as the seat assigned to the ladies of foreign ministers is very near the throne. This morning when I awoke the fog was thicker than I ever knew it, even here. The air was one dense orange-coloured mass. What a pity the English cannot borrow our bright blue skies in which to exhibit their royal pageants. Mr. Bancroft's court dress had not been sent home, our servants' liveries had not made their appearance, and our carriage only arrived last night, and I had not passed judgment upon it. Fogs and tradesmen! These are the torments of London. Very soon came the tailor with embroidered dress, sword, and chapeau, but alas! Mr. Isidore, who was to have dressed my hair at 10:30, was not forthcoming, and to complete my perplexity, he had my head-dress in his possession. At last, just as Russell had resumed her office at the toilette, came Isidore, a little before 12, coiffure and all, which was so pretty that I quite forgave him all his sins. It was of green leaves and white fleur-de-lis, with a white ostrich feather drooping on one side. I wear my hair now plain in front, and the wreath was very flat and classical in its style. My dress was black velvet with a very rich bertha. A bouquet on the front of fleur-de-lis, like the coiffure, and a cashmere shawl, completed my array. I have had the diamond pin and earrings which your father gave me reset and made into a magnificent brooch, and so arranged I can also wear it as a necklace or bracelet. On this occasion it was my necklace. Miss Murray came to go with me, as she wished to be by my side to point out everybody, and her badge as maid of honour would take her to any part of the house. At 12:30 she and I set out, and after leaving us the carriage returned for your father and Mr. Broadhead. But first let me tell you something of our equipage. It is a chariot, not a coach, that is, it has but one seat, but the whole front being glass makes it much more agreeable to such persons as have not large families. The colour is maroon, with a silver moulding, and it has the American arms on the panel. The liveries are blue and red. On court days they have blue plush breeches, and white silk stockings, with buckles on their shoes. Your father leaves all these matters to me, and they have given me no little plague. When I thought I had arranged everything necessary, the coachman, good old Brooks, solicited an audience a day or two ago, and began, "Mistress, did you tell them to send the pads and the fronts, and the handpieces?" "Heaven and earth! What are all these things?" said I. "Why, ma'am, we always has pads under the saddle on court days, trimmed round with the colours of the livery, and we has fronts made out of ribbons for the horses' heads, and we has white handpieces for the reins." This is a specimen of the little troubles of court life, but it has its compensations. To go back to Miss Murray and myself, who are driving through the park between files of people, thousands and thousands, all awaiting with patient, loyal faces the passage of the Queen and of the state carriages. The Queen's was drawn by 8 cream-coloured horses, and the servants flaming with scarlet and gold. This part of the park, near the palace, is only accessible to the carriages of the foreign ministers, and officers of the household. We arrive at the Parliament House, move through the long corridor, and give up our tickets at the door of the chamber. It is a very long, narrow room. At the upper end is the throne, on the right is the seat of the ambassadors, on the left of their ladies. Just in front of the throne is the wool sack of the Lord Chancellor, looking like a drawing-room divan, covered with crimson velvet. Below this are rows of seats for the judges, who are all in their wigs and scarlet robes, the bishops and the peers, all in robes of scarlet and ermine. Opposite the throne at the lower end is the bar of the Commons. On the right of the Queen's chair is a vacant one, on which is carved 3 plumes, the insignia of the Prince of Wales, who will occupy it when he is 7 or 9 years old. On the left Prince Albert sits. The seat assigned me was in the front row, and quite open, like a sofa, so that I could talk with any gentleman whom I knew. Madame Van de Weyer was on one side of me, and the Princess Callimachi on the other, and Miss Murray just behind me. She insisted on introducing me to all her noble relatives. Her cousin, the young Duke of Athol, the Duke of Buccleuch, their nephew, the Marquis of Camden, her brother the Bishop of Rochester. There were many whom I had seen before, so that the hour passed very agreeably. Very soon came in the Duke of Cambridge, at which everybody rose, he being a royal duke. He was dressed in the scarlet kingly robe, trimmed with ermine, and with his white hair and whiskers (he is an old man) was most picturesque and scenic, reminding me of King Lear and other stage kings. He requested to be introduced to me, upon which I rose, of course. He soon said, "Be seated," and we went on with the conversation. I told him how much I liked Kew Garden, where he has a favourite place. When I first entered I was greeted very cordially by a personage in a black gown and wig, whom I did not know. He laughed and said, "I am Mr. Senior, whom you saw only Saturday evening, but you do not know me in my wig." It is indeed an entire transformation, for it reaches down on the shoulders. He is a master in Chancery. He stood by me nearly all the time and pointed out many of the judges, and some persons not in Miss Murray's line. But the trumpets sound! The Queen approaches! The trumpet continues, and first enter at a side door close at my elbow the College of Heralds richly dressed, slowly, 2 and 2, and then the great officers of the household, then the Lord Chancellor bearing the purse, seal, and speech of the Queen, with the mace-bearers before him. Then Lord Lansdowne with the crown, the Earl of Zetland with the cap of maintenance, and the Duke of Wellington with the sword of state. Then Prince Albert leading the Queen, followed by the Duchess of Sutherland, mistress of the robes, and the Marchioness of Douro, daughter-in-law of the Duke of Wellington, who was one of the ladies in waiting. The Queen and Prince sit down, while everybody else remains standing. The Queen then says in a voice most clear and sweet, "My lords," rolling the R, "be seated." Upon which the peers sit down, except those who enter with the Queen, who group themselves about the throne in the most picturesque manner. The Queen had a crown of diamonds, with splendid necklace and stomacher of the same. The Duchess of Sutherland close by her side with her ducal coronet of diamonds, and a little back, Lady Douro also with her coronet. On the right of the throne stood the Lord Chancellor, with scarlet robe and flowing wig, holding the speech, surrounded by the emblems of his office. A little farther, one step down, Lord Lansdowne, holding the crown on a crimson velvet cushion, and on the left the Duke of Wellington, brandishing the sword of state in the air, with the Earl of Zetland by his side. The Queen's train of royal purple, or rather deep crimson, was borne by many train-bearers. The whole scene seemed to me like a dream or a vision. After a few minutes the Lord Chancellor came forward and presented the speech to the Queen. She read it, sitting, and most exquisitely. Her voice is flute-like, and her whole emphasis decided and intelligent. Very soon after the speech is finished she leaves the house, and we all follow, as soon as we can get our carriages. Lord Lansdowne told me before she came in that the speech would be longer than usual, but not so long as your President's speeches. It has been a day of high pleasure and more like a romance than a reality to me, and being in the very midst of it as I was, made it more striking than if I had looked on it from a distant gallery. End of Letter 11. Read by Sibella Denton. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information, please visit LibriVox.org. Of Letters from England, 1846 to 1849, by Elizabeth Davis Bancroft. Read for LibriVox.org into the public domain. Letter to W.D.B. and A.B. London, February 7, 1847. My dear sons, on Friday we dined with 2 bachelors, Mr. Peabody and Mr. Coates, who are American bankers. Mr. Peabody is a friend of Mr. Corcoran, and was formerly a partner of Riggs, in Baltimore. Mr. Coates is of Boston. They mustered up all the Americans that could be found, and we dined with 26 of our countrymen. Monday morning. Last evening we were at home to see any Americans who might chance to come. I make tea in the drawing-room, on a little table with a white cloth, which would not be esteemed comme il faut with us. There is none of the parade of eating in the largest evening party here. I see nothing but tea, and sometimes I find an informal refreshment table in the room where we put on our cloaks. I got a note yesterday from the O'Connor Don, enclosing an order to admit me to the House of Commons on Monday. You will be curious to know who is the O'Connor Don. He is Dennis O'Connor, Esquire, but is of the oldest family in Ireland, and the representative of the last kings of Connaught. He is called altogether the O'Connor Don, and begins his note to me with that title. You remember Campbell's poem of O'Connor's Child? Sunday, 14th February. Yesterday morning was my breakfast at Sir Robert Inglis's. The hour was 9:30, and as his house is 2 miles off I had to be up wondrous early for me. The weather has been very cold for this climate for the last few days, though we should think it moderate. They know nothing of extreme cold here. But to return to our breakfast, where, notwithstanding the cold, the guests were punctually assembled. The Marquis of Northampton and his sisters, the Bishop of London with his black apron, Sir Stratford Canning, Mr. Rutherford, Lord Advocate for Scotland, the Solicitor General, and 1 or 2 others. The conversation was very agreeable, and I enjoyed my first specimen of an English breakfast exceedingly. Our invitations jostle each other now Parliament has begun, for everybody invites on Wednesday, Saturday, or Sunday, when there are no debates. We had 3 dinner invitations for next Wednesday, from Mr. Harcourt, Marquis of Anglesey, and Mrs. Mansfield. We go to the former. The Queen held a levee on Friday, for gentlemen only. Your father went, of course. Sunday, February 21st. I left off on Sunday, on which day I got a note from Lady Morgan, saying that she wished us to come and meet some agreeables at her house. There I met Sir William and Lady Molesworth, Sir Benjamin Hall, etc., and had a long talk with Eothen, who is a quiet, unobtrusive person in manner, though his book is quite in effervescence. On Wednesday we dined with Mr. Harcourt, and met there Lord Brougham, who did the talking chiefly, Lord and Lady Mahon, Mr. Le Boucher, etc. It was a most agreeable party, and we were very glad to meet Lord Brougham, who we had not seen before. Lord Brougham is entertaining, and very much listened to. Indeed, the English habit seems to be to suffer a few people to do up a great part of the talking, such as Macaulay, Brougham, and Sidney, Smith and Mackintosh in their day. On Saturday evening at 10 o'clock we went to a little party at Lady Strathden's. After staying there 3/4 of an hour we went to Lady Palmerston's, where we were all the great London world, the Duchess of Sutherland among the number. She is most noble, at the same time lovely. We had an autograph note from Sir Robert Peel, inviting us to dine next Saturday, and were engaged. I hope they will ask us again, for I know few things better than to see him, as we should in dining there. I have the same interest in seeing the really distinguished men of England that I should ever have in the pictures and statues of Rome, and indeed much greater. I wish I was better prepared for my life here by a more extensive culture. Mere fine ladyism will not do, nor prosy bluism, but one needs for a thorough enjoyment of society, a healthy, practical, and extensive culture, and a use of the modern languages in our position would be convenient. I do not know how a gentleman can get on without it here, and I find so desirable that I devote a good deal of time to speaking French with Louisa's governess. Your father uses French a great deal with his colleagues, who many of them speak English with great difficulty, and some not at all. Lady Charlotte Lindsay came one day this week to engage us to dine with her on Wednesday, but yesterday she came to say that she wanted Lord Brougham to meet us, and he could not come till Friday. Fortunately we had no dinner engagement on that day, and we are also to meet the Miss Barrys, Horace Walpole's Miss Barrys, who, with Lady Charlotte herself, are the last remnants of the old school here. End of Letter 12. Read by Sibella Denton. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information, please visit LibriVox.org. Letters from England, 1846 to 1849, by Elizabeth Davis Bancroft. Read for LibriVox.org into the public domain. Letter to IPD, February 21st. My dear Uncle, I wrote J.D. a week or two before I heard of his death, but was unable to tell him anything of Lord North, as I had not met Lady Charlotte Lindsay. I have seen her twice this week at Baron Parke's and at Lord Campbell's, and told her how much I had wished to do so before, and on what account. She says her father heard reading with great pleasure, and that one of her sisters could read the classics, Latin, and I think Greek, which he enjoyed to the last. She says that he never complained of losing his sight, but that her mother has told her that it worried him in his old age that he remained minister during our troubles at a period when he wished himself to resign. He sometimes talked of it in the solitude of sleepless nights, her mother has told her. On Tuesday morning we were invited by Dr. Buckland, the Dean of Westminster, to go to his house, and from thence to the Abbey, to witness the funeral of the Duke of Northumberland. The Dean, who has control of everything in the Abbey, issued tickets to several hundred persons to go and witness the funeral, but only Lord Northampton's family, the Bunsens, the Prussian minister, and ourselves went to his house, and into the Dean's little gallery. After the ceremony there were a crowd of visitors at the Dean's, and I met many old acquaintances, and made many new ones, among whom were Lady Chantrey, a nice person. After the crowd cleared off, we sat down to a long table at lunch, always an important meal here, and afterward the Dean took me on his arm and showed me everything within the Abbey precincts. He took us first to the Percy Chapel to see the vault of the Percys. From thence the Dean took us to the Jerusalem chamber where Henry IV died, and then all over the Westminster School. We went first to the hall where the young men were eating dinner. We then went to the school room, where every inch of the wall and benches is covered with names, some of them most illustrious, as Dryden's. There were 2 bunches of rods, which the Dean assured me were not mere symbols of power, but were daily used, as indeed the broken twigs scattered upon the floor plainly showed. Our ferules are thought rather barbarous, but a gentle touch from a slender twig, not at all so. These young men looked to me as old as our collegians. We then went to their study rooms, play rooms, and sleeping rooms. The whole 40 sleep in one long and well ventilated room, the walls of which were also covered with names. At the foot of each bed was a large chest covered with leather, as mouldering and time-worn as the Abbey itself. Here are educated the sons of some of the noblest families, and the Archbishop of York has had 6 sons here, and all of them were in succession the captain of the school. On Wednesday evening we went first to our friends, the Bunsens, where we were invited to meet the Duchess of Sutherland with a few other persons. Bunsen is very popular here. He is learned and accomplished, and was so much praised in the biography of Dr. Arnold, the late historian of Rome, that he has great reputation in the world of letters. Although we have great pleasure in the society of Chevalier and Madame Bunsen, and in those whom we meet at their house. On this occasion we only stayed half an hour, which I passed in talking with the Bishop of Norwich and his wife, Mrs. Stanley, and went to Lady Morgan's without waiting till the Duchess of Sutherland came. There we found her little rooms full of agreeable people. The next day, Thursday, there was a grand opera for the benefit of the Irish, and all the diplomatic corps were obliged to take boxes. Lady Palmerston, who was one of the 3 patronesses, secured a very good box for us, directly opposite the Queen, and only 3 from the stage. We took with us Mrs. Milman and W. T. Davis, to whom it gave a grand opportunity of seeing the Queen and the assembled aristocracy, at least all who are now in London. God Save the Queen, sung with the whole audience standing, was a noble sight. The Queen also stood, and at the end gave 3 curtsies. On Friday Captain and Mrs. Wormley, with Miss Wormley, dined with us, with Mr. and Mrs. Carlyle, Miss Murray, the maid of honour, Mr. and Mrs. Pell of New York, with William T. and Mr. Broadhead. William was very glad to see Carlyle, who showed himself off to perfection, uttering his paradoxes in broad Scotch. Last evening we dined at Mr. Thomas Baring's, and a most agreeable dinner it was. The company consisted of 12 persons, Lord and Lady Ashburton, etc. I like Lady Ashburton extremely. She is full of intelligence, reads everything, talks most agreeably, and still loves America. She is by no means one of those who abjure their country. I have seen few persons in England whom I should esteem a more delightful friend or companion than Lady Ashburton, and I do not know why, but I had received a different impression of her. Lord Ashburton, by whom I sat at dinner, struck me as still one of the wisest men I have seen in England. Lady Ashburton, who was sitting by Mr. Bancroft, leant forward and said to her husband, "We can bring bushels of corn this year to England." "Who do you mean by we?" said he. "Why, we Americans, to be sure." Monday evening. Yesterday we dined at Count St. Aulair's, the French ambassador, who is a charming old man of the old French school, at a sort of amicable dinner given to Lord and Lady Palmerston. Lord John Russell was of the party, with the Russian ambassador and lady, Mr. and Madame Van de Weyer, the Prussian and Turkish ministers. The house of the French embassy is fine, but these formal grand dinners are not so charming as the small ones. The present state of feeling between Lord Palmerston and the French government gave it a kind of interest, however, and it certainly went off in a much better spirit than Lady Normanby's famous party, which Guizot would not attend. It seems very odd to me to be in the midst of these European affairs, which I have all my life looked upon from so great a distance. End of Letter 13. Read by Sibella Denton. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information, please visit LibriVox.org. Letters from England, 1846 to 1849, by Elizabeth Davis Bancroft. Read for LibriVox.org into the public domain. Letter to Mrs. W. W. Story, London, March 23, 1847. My dear Mrs. Story, I should have thanked you by the last steamer for your note and the charming volume which accompanied it, but my thoughts and feelings were so much occupied by the sad tidings I heard from my own family that I wrote to no one out of it. The poems, which would at all times have given me great pleasure, gave me still more here than they would if I were with you on the other side of the Atlantic. I am not cosmopolitan enough to love any nature so well as our American nature, and in addition to the charm of its poetry, every piece brought up to me the scenes amidst which it had been written. How dear these associations are your husband will soon know when he too is separated from his native shores and from those he loves. I shall look forward with great pleasure to seeing him here, and only wish you were to accompany him, for your own sake, for his, and for ours. His various cultures will enable him to enjoy most fully all that Europe can yield him in every department. My own regret ever since I have been here has been that the seed has not fallen upon better ground, for though I thought myself not ignorant wholly, I certainly lose much that I might enjoy more keenly if I were better prepared for it. I envy the pleasure which Mr. Story will receive from music, painting, and sculpture in Europe, even if he were destitute of the creative inspiration which he will take with him. For ourselves, we have everything to make us happy here, and I should be quite so, if I could forget that I had a country and children with very dear friends 3,000 miles away. There are certain sympathies of country which one cannot overcome. On the other hand, I certainly enjoy pleasures of the highest kind, and am every day floated like one in a dream into the midst of persons and scenes that make my life seem more like a drama than a reality. Nothing is more unreal than the actual presence of persons of whom one has heard much, and long wished to see. One day I find myself at dinner by the side of Sir Robert Peel, another by Lord John Russell, or at Lord Lansdowne's table with Mrs. Norris, or at a charming breakfast with Mr. Rogers, surrounded by pictures and marbles, or with tall feathers and a long train, making curtsies to a queen. End of Letter 14. Read by Sibella Denton. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information, please visit LibriVox.org.